I'm Elliot Peters, and this is What Was That About? A show that tries to get to the point of every movie. This week we're talking about a 90s action-adventure classic with thrills, chills, and plenty of dinosaurs. It's Jurassic Park. You can expect a quick plot refresher, a couple of deep dives, a tangent or two, and at the end we'll decide once and for all, what was that about? All that and more after this quick intro. Welcome to the pod. I'm excited about this. I've been wanting to do something like this for a while, and it never really felt like the right time or like I really had the right subject in mind. But they say when you're starting a podcast that you need to make sure that you're talking about something that you could already kind of monologue about for an hour without interruption, and movies are that for me. For those of you who are watching on the video, hi, feel free to subscribe. But if you're just an audio listener, I love you too. In fact, I love you more. So today we're talking about Jurassic Park, which came out in June of 1993. It was, of course, directed by Steven Spielberg, with cinematography by Dean Cundey. It's got a gorgeous all-star cast: Sam Neill, Laura Dern, Jeff Goldblum, Richard Attenborough. It was edited by Michael Kahn and with music by John Williams. So why did I choose this movie as the inaugural episode? Well, like most Spielberg movies, I think that Jurassic Park is this perfect intersection between pop cinema entertainment and thought-provoking science fiction. It's almost the best of both worlds in the way that a lot of Spielberg movies are, because it appeals to general audiences, and yet, if you peel back the layers, there's a lot there. He's truly an artist. And Jurassic Park is, I believe, one of the finer examples of thematic work in Spielberg's rich filmography. No doubt this is partially because the screenplay was co-penned by the author of the original novel, Michael Crichton, with David Coep, who is also a wonderful screenwriter. On top of that, I also just love the movie. What do I love about this movie? Dinosaurs. I was a dinosaur kid, if you couldn't tell by listening to me or looking at me. I definitely give off the vibe of a kid that was, had a favorite dinosaur, asked other kids what their favorite dinosaur was. And so when I saw this, I don't know, I was maybe 9 or 10, and I remember watching it in the summertime. This has always very much been a summer movie for me. I remember watching it in the summer on a CRT television, right after coming back home from the beach, eating frozen Capri Suns with my little brother, kind of just sitting there in awe as this amazing story unfolded in front of us. That's a testament to the visual power and the storytelling power of the movie, that I was able to watch it on what was ostensibly like a kind of shitty setup. It was on cable TV, I'm pretty sure, so there were commercials and everything, but I stayed tuned for that. And I still stay tuned all these years later. If you throw this movie on, I am locked in from start to finish. There's a lot to love. John Williams' score is incredible, one of the most famous movie scores of all time. And it's got some of Spielberg's best suspense. I think that there's this careful concoction of both tension and mayhem in both the Tyrannosaurus escape sequence and also the raptor in the kitchen scene. I mean, there's so many scenes like that, but those two stand out to me as being these perfectly engineered little machines of narrative suspense. And it's one of those movies that I revisit pretty much every year or so. I wouldn't be surprised if I've seen this at least 10 times. This is definitely one of those movies where the behind-the-scenes story probably counts as being nearly as interesting as the story itself. But what we're going to do here on this show is really take movies at face value. So all that being said, what was that about? On paper, a dinosaur theme park, with all the wonder, amazement, fear, and horror that entails. The action scenes are legendary, the performances are wonderful, and the special effects changed the face of cinema as we know it. Beneath the surface, there's some really great themes here, and I've got some selections from the transcript that I'd like to read to you today. We'll read them, we'll unpack them, and we'll let that inform our key takeaways. So, the first theme that I want to talk about is technology versus nature. And I think that there's also kind of a mini theme couched inside that, which is science and faith. Ian Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum, has that wonderful line, God creates dinosaurs, God destroys dinosaurs, God creates man, man destroys God, man creates dinosaurs, which then Laura Dern's Ellie Sattler follows up with, dinosaurs eat man and women inherit the earth. It's a very funny joke, but it also has, I think, some serious bearing on the underlying themes of the story. It brings up a worthwhile tension to unpack. With that in mind, I want to take a look at this one scene. It's one of my favorite scenes from the film. I think you'd call it the lunch scene. It happens in the first half of the film, before any of the mayhem and the carnage sort of starts. We're gonna take a look at that today. Interior Visitor Center day. John Hammond, Alan Grant, Ellie Sattler, Ian Malcolm, and Donald Gennaro, the lawyer, eating lunch at a long table in the Visitor Center restaurant. Gennaro opens the scene up by saying, "We can charge anything we want. $2,000 a day, $10,000 a day, and people will pay it. And then there's the merchandise, and I can..." And John Hammond cuts him off by saying, Donald, this park was not built to cater only for the super rich. Everyone in the world has the right to enjoy these animals." Gennaro says, "Sure, they will. What, we'll have a coupon day or something." Malcolm then interjects, and here's where I think the theme sort of starts to rear its head a little bit, is with Malcolm's side in the conversation. "Gee, the lack of humility before nature that's being displayed here staggers me." This leads into a bit of conflict. They start to butt heads a little bit, and that leads Malcolm into saying this great line, "Don't you see the danger, John, inherent in what you're doing here? Genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid that's found his dad's gun." There's also some serious themes of like parenthood and children in the movie that we'll talk about in a little bit. That's part of why I love that image, especially coming from Malcolm, who it's established later has a lot of kids. But then that sort of leads into this larger monologue, which goes, "If I may, I'll tell you the problem with the scientific power that you're using here. It didn't require any discipline to attain it. You know, you read what others had done and you took the next step. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility for it. You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it. You're gonna sell it." This also connects wonderfully to the themes of entertainment versus profit, which I have another scene I'll talk about in a little bit. But the scene then moves into kind of this conversation about, well, you know, if John Hammond had resurrected condors from the edge of extinction, which are, you know, an endangered species, then maybe Malcolm wouldn't have so much to say. And Malcolm fires back, "This isn't some species that was obliterated by deforestation or the building of a dam. Dinosaurs had their shot and nature selected them for extinction." Hammond starts to get a little touchy. "I simply don't understand this Luddite attitude, especially from a scientist. I mean, how can we stand in the light of discovery and not act?" Which Malcolm then answers a little inflammatory with, "Oh, what's so great about discovery? It's a violent, penetrative act that scars what it explores. What you call discovery, I call the rape of the natural world." On some level, that's character exposure, as well as discussing the themes of the film. That's part of what I love about this movie, is that nobody ever acts out of character as they interact with the underlying thematic framework that the screenplay is touching on. That is a very Ian Malcolm thing to say. It's aggressive and rude and not something you should say at lunch, but at the same time, he has a very worthwhile point to consider, which is about this tension between technology, the technology that's being used, and the nature that it is creating. And of course, Ian's whole thing is chaos theory, right? That the tiny little butterfly effects of the world will have unforeseen consequences at some point down the line. And that, I think, is something that the movie very heavily sides with. Ian is proven right on a lot of occasions, because what Hammond is trying to do is control something that cannot be controlled, and technology is his sort of means to do that. But science, of course, and Hammond brings this up by saying, I can't believe I'm hearing this from a scientist. Science is a language that is used to describe things that we see, not a set of laws that nature has to obey, right? And mathematics falls under that same umbrella. So no matter how much you try to use technology to control nature, it's really the other way around that works, right? Nature affords us the ability to create technology. And I think that's something that the movie really wonderfully depicts. Alan Grant is sort of an interesting character to bring up when we're talking about science and nature, because Throughout the film, Alan has all these run-ins with technology which don't go his way. He's depicted as being very much a man of the earth. I mean, when we first meet him, he's literally like digging in the desert, right? And at that dig site, he accidentally disrupts the signal of a television. Later on, when the power goes off during the tour, he exclaims, "What did I touch?" And the film repeatedly suggests that when technology fails, and it always does, natural instinct is the only way forward. It's the saving grace that allows Alan to protect the children, ultimately, and allows them to survive. It's Alan's line that I think really puts a cap on that earlier lunch scene. Hammond appeals to both him and Ellie Sattler, help me out here. This rock star mathematician is kind of taking me to task. And Grant says, the world has just changed so radically, and we're all running to catch up. I don't want to jump to any conclusions, but look, dinosaurs and man, two species separated by 65 million years of evolution, have just been suddenly thrown back into the mix together. How can we possibly have the slightest idea what to expect? So next I want to talk about children and parents. I mentioned this earlier, but there's a really interesting overlapping set of characters here. You've got Ellie Sattler and Alan Grant. Ellie very much wants to have kids with Alan. Alan doesn't want kids. And then you have the grandchildren of John Hammond, Lex and Tim, who are the kids that are thrown into danger at several different occasions, and Alan sort of has to look out for them. And through that relationship, Alan comes around on the notion of having children of his own. And the movie definitely ends on sort of this hopeful, hey, maybe he and Ellie will have kids together. And that's portrayed as a good thing. But there's also, in sort of a weird way, almost a fatherly relationship between John Hammond and the dinosaurs. He's very much the father of the park. He is the grandfather of Lex and Tim. So he's, this paternal figure both in the construction of the park and in the target audience of the attractions and the people that he's trying to bring into the park. He's their patriarch as well. And so I want to take a look at two scenes from the film. One is this early scene between Ellie and Grant that I think foreshadows something in a very funny way that I'm going to point out. And then we're going to take a look at a second scene after that. We'll start out here. Exterior, hillside, day. Grant and Ellie march up the hill by the dig site. Ellie says, "Hey, Alan, if you wanted to scare the kid, you could have pulled a gun on him, I think that this is odd that there's kind of two different scenes in the film where a character brings to mind children and guns in the same sentence. It happens here and it happens again later at the lunch scene. Children and danger and weapons. I don't know what to make of that, but it is odd. Of course, Ellie is talking about this kid who was at the dig site earlier that Alan kind of scared off because the kid was acting very flippant and wasn't very impressed by the dinosaurs, and Alan was like, you should be impressed. They could kill you, if you were 65 million years ago, they could rip you apart. And the kid is traumatized. Grant says, "Yeah, I know, kids. You want to have one of those?" Ellie says, "I don't want that kid, but a breed of child, Dr. Grant, could be intriguing. I mean, what's so wrong with kids?" This is funny because I think the language here kind of, calls to mind the scientific nature of having children, offspring. Grant says, Ellie, look, they're noisy, they're messy, they're expensive. And this line is very funny to me because he might as well be describing the dinosaurs. They're noisy, they're messy, they're expensive. Dr. Hammond himself says spared no expense at least 5 different times throughout the movie, referring to the cost of putting together a theme park like this. Ellie says, cheap, cheap. Grant says, they smell. Ellie says, they do not smell. Grant says, some of them smell. Babies smell. Of course, the kids that we meet later on in the story are lovely and funny and precocious, and the audience can't help but feel protective of them in the same way that Alan does. I think, obviously, Spielberg is a master at directing kids, and the performances that he gets out of child actors are unmatched, in my opinion. Lex and Tim are no exception, and the movie really wouldn't work without them. If they come across as inept or an obstacle at any moment, then Alan's character arc doesn't work, right? Because at the end, he has to feel okay with having kids. He has to want to have kids. and the audience has to want that for him, right? So from the jump, Lex and Tim have to be cute, they have to be smart, they have to be kind, and yet also they are kind of annoying at parts, and I think that balance is very difficult to strike, and I think that the movie does such a great job of managing that. If I can move away from Ellie and Grant for a minute, let's talk about the second scene. And this is the scene in the hatchery, as everybody has kind of come through the preliminary pre-show part of the tour. They end up in this big room where there's all these eggs. Interior hatchery day. An egg is cracking as a baby dinosaur tries to get out, just its head sticking out of the shell. And Hammond says, "Henry," talking to one of the scientists there, "why didn't you tell me I insist on being here when they're born?" The dinosaur then hatches with much coaxing from Hammond, who says, "There you are, there. They imprint on the first creature they come in contact with. That's it. Helps them to trust me. I've been present for the birth of every little creature on this island." That is a remarkable thing for him to claim. And the movie doesn't dwell on the line or the thought that much, but we later see that there were a lot of dinosaurs at Jurassic Park. There's a lot of animals there. And Hammond wants to feel a personal connection with every single one of them. I think it's one of the things that elevates him from being this, almost evil capitalist guy who wants to just make a lot of money into someone who really believes in there being something special and beautiful here. It's complicated in a way that I really value. And I think later films in the Jurassic World series cannot even attempt to hold a candle to. There are so many, one-note, stock, villain, rich guy characters who want to build something for the sake of building it, or, make a lot of money off of these animals in a terrible, horrific, carnivorous zoo. But Hammond isn't like that. Hammond is different. He has a dream. And it's a dream that relates to another theme that I think is a very beautiful idea that we'll get to in a minute. Returning to Alan, Alan warms to the children over the course of the movie by guarding them, looking after them, tending to their needs, and helping them to survive. Hammond, meanwhile, tries to control his children, the dinosaurs, to force them to behave in ways which contradict nature. And try as he might, he cannot forcibly nurture them into obeying him. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between extinction and perseverance. The movie came out in 1993, and at the time, the origin of birds was still kind of the scientific topic that was up for debate. Science had attempted to, fill in that blank with a lot of different theories and hypotheses, and the idea that dinosaurs had not really gone extinct, but that they had evolved into birds in some form or other, was kind of a subversive idea at this point in 1993. It's something that Michael Crichton hangs his hat on in his novel, and by extension the movie does as well. Nowadays, that is a generally accepted bit of scientific information, that birds are dinosaurs, and that dinosaurs are not really extinct. But it's worth noting that is a very big swing that the movie takes, and it happened to pay off. There's a lot of other things about the science in the movie that don't quite work, or have been disproven over time. Obviously, the size of the velociraptors is this point of contention with archaeological or paleontological communities. That velociraptors technically would have been like about the size of a chihuahua, which isn't scary. Well, maybe it is scary. Chihuahuas frighten me, but a velociraptor in the pop culture sense is this 6-foot tall, fast tiger of an animal. But so yeah, the fact that the origin of birds is something that this movie gets right is fascinating, and it's really important, I think, when it comes to the idea of perseverance and the way that the movie depicts perseverance, because throughout the film, the extinction of the dinosaurs is likened to the perceived end of Grant and Ellie's profession, which by extension could maybe refer to any type of career or passion that hits a dead end or a roadblock. Their line of work is, quote, extinct. Yet the film hints towards further applications of their kind of study and their skill set. At one point, Hammond looks to Ellie and says, who better to get the children through Jurassic Park than a dinosaur expert, referring to Alan Grant. And there is another scene, I think, that beautifully sums this up. It is exterior tree night, following this night of absolute mayhem. You've got the kids and Alan hiding out in a tree after being terrorized by the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Alan shifts, getting comfortable, but something in his pocket pinches him. He winces and digs it out. It's the velociraptor claw he unearthed so long ago in Montana. Yesterday, actually. He looks at it, thinking a million thoughts, staring at this thing that used to be so priceless. This text comes directly from the screenplay by David Coop and Michael Crichton, and I think it's important that they point out this time span here. It's something that's very easy to miss when watching the movie in its entirety, but it is a true fact that Ellie and Alan get on Hammond's helicopter at the dig site, and then the very next day they are running from dinosaurs. So he found that claw yesterday, and he's looking at it thinking, wow, that is already behind me. It's already extinct, for lack of a better word. And that's how fast something can be put in the past. Just as the dinosaur's entire lifespan is behind them, so too is maybe Alan's last dig. And Lex looks at him and says, what are you and Ellie going to do now if you don't have to dig up dinosaur bones anymore? And Alan Grant responds, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to evolve too. And that is a beautiful idea of perseverance. And it's something that's directly linked to the fact that the dinosaurs are not extinct, right? They're still alive, not only on the park, but elsewhere in our world. Anytime you see a bird, that is a dinosaur. And at the end of the film, Alan's character arc reaches this gorgeous ending where he has come to terms with the fact that his lifelong passion is changed or shifted because he looks out of the window of the helicopter and sees this flock of birds following them. And also, he comes to terms with his issues regarding parenthood. Obviously, I think the most famous line from Jurassic Park is, life finds a way. It's something that Jeff Goldblum says with delicious zeal and plenty of and it comes back again and again. I can't remember if it's ever been used as a tagline for one of the sequels. It probably has. But in a lot of ways, I think that that is a pretty solid contender for what Jurassic Park is about. Life finding a way, life continuing on, the things that we love continuing on, and finding new ways to love them or to change our attitudes about them. Perseverance, in a nutshell. The last scene that I want to talk about today, and that I want to read some excerpts from, is, I believe, my favorite scene in the movie. And the fact that this is my favorite scene in the movie, I think, tells you a lot about the type of moviegoer I am, because there's no dinosaurs in this scene. It's just two people talking. And what makes me love it is, I think it's one of John Williams's best themes in the film. It's an often overlooked one. It's a very small and intimate one, but it's a gorgeous and haunting piece of music. And additionally, I think that it's a great example of Spielberg's mastery over the camera, because the camera is being used to tell the story with all of these gorgeous long takes and slow push-ins, and when the camera moves is very important. And at the end of the day, it's all about highlighting and accentuating the actors' performances, the actors in this scene being Richard Attenborough and Laura Dern as Ellie Sattler. It is, I think you would call it the ice cream scene or the flea circus scene. Interior, visitor center restaurant, night. Hammond sits at the table alone. There's a bucket of ice cream in the middle, and he's eating a dish of it, staring down morosely. Ellie has come in and found him sitting like this. Hammond says, they were all melting. It's midnight. They've all been through a lot today. The dinosaurs have escaped. The children are missing. A lot is left up in the air at this point in the story. Ellie says, Malcolm's okay for now. I gave him a shot of morphine. Hammond says, they'll all be fine. Who better to get the children through Jurassic Park than a dinosaur expert? There's that line that I was talking about. There's a beat, and then Hammond shifts and says, you know, the first attraction I ever built when I came down from Scotland was a flea circus. Petticoat Lane. Really quite wonderful. We had a wee trapeze and a merry-go carousel and a seesaw. They all moved, motorized, of course. But people would say they could see the fleas. I can see the fleas, Mummy. Can't you see the fleas? Clown fleas, high wire fleas, fleas on parade. But with this place, I wanted to show them something that wasn't an illusion, something that was real, something they could see and touch. An aim not devoid of merit. Ellie says, but you can't think through this one, John. You have to feel it. And Hammond goes, you're right. You are absolutely right. Hiring Nedry was a mistake. That's obvious. We're over-dependent on automation. I can see that now. Now, the next time, everything's correctable. Ellie says, John. And Hammond goes, creation is an act of sheer will. Next time, it'll be flawless. And Ellie says, it's still the flea circus. It's all an illusion. Hammond continues on his line of thought. When we have control, and Ellie says, you never had control. That's the illusion. Now, I was overwhelmed by the power of this place. Well, I made a mistake too. I didn't have enough respect for that power, and it's out now. The only thing that matters now are the people we love. Alan, Lex, and Tim. John, they're out there, where people are dying. So, she takes a spoon out of one of the buckets of ice cream. She goes, it's good. And Hammond says his catchphrase, spared no expense. This scene is my favorite one because it engages with so many different corners of the story, all just through the dialogue and all just through the performances. And it's a lot about what's being unsaid. Hammond is talking a lot, but really what he's doing is thinking, and he's thinking through this problem. And it takes Ellie interrupting him several times to get him off of this train of thought. And what he's talking about here is the intersection between entertainment and profit. And this theme is a really, really interesting one because it's almost a meta theme, because the movie itself cost a gigantic amount of money to make. Its marketing budget rivaled its production budget, and yet it made a profit through the power of this awe-inspiring entertainment. You know, ILM created dinosaurs in a way no one had ever seen dinosaurs before. It was practically as though they had just built Jurassic Park for real. That is the level of technological innovation that went on here. And you know, Spielberg is a businessman, right? He's a really brilliant businessman. He's the highest grossing film director of all time. His movies make insane amounts of bank at the box office. He is definitely, I would almost put him as a producer before I would put him as a director in terms of his sheer level of accomplishment, right? Because he has this like driving idea engine. And yet at the same time, he is really, really, really good at selling himself as this dreamer. He's on record as saying, you know, like movies are dreams, or, you know, like all this artistic, flowery language that he uses to describe his work. And he's very passionate about the craft, and he fell in love with it as a child, and it's still that childlike wonderment that he carries with him all the time. And I think that tension that exists within Spielberg exists within this movie more so than any of his other movies, because it is a film about trying to make a lot of money off of a large amount of people, and yet the guy who's trying to do that believes in some kind of gorgeous, pure magic trick that he wants to pull off for the sake of the people. You know, he doesn't want to just feed them empty lunch boxes. He wants the actual product to mean something. It's so unique. I don't think any of Spielberg's other movies do this. And I feel like you can really feel that energy coming through in the character of John Hammond, and in the tensions that are, you know, on display through the interactions of all the characters. To some extent, everybody sort of takes a side in that, and some people do believe in the dream and some people don't. You know, Ellie and Alan are overjoyed at the sight of a dinosaur for the first time. Who wouldn't be, you know? We all are, sitting there in the movie theater with the lights off, and there's a gigantic Brachiosaurus, and it's real. I've never seen anything like that. It's 1993. It's not stop motion, you know, all respect to Phil Tippett. But yeah, there's this danger in that, because we could get exploited. And in the case of Jurassic Park, we could get eaten. Obviously, like Jeff Goldblum says at a later point in the movie, Pirates of the Caribbean breaks down, the pirates don't eat the tourists, right? But the Disneyland allegory, I think, is funny and very apt. because it's it's this theme park that some people regard as being very hollow. Some people think that it has some ineffable magic to it. The artistry is still worth appreciating, even if the corporation is despicable. There's a lot of thematic ground to plumb here, and I think Spielberg does a beautiful job doing it, and the screenplay does a beautiful job doing it. So, what do we think? What is Jurassic Park about? Really? Obviously, it's about all of these things to some degree. But if we were to pinpoint one of them and say this is the central theme of the story, or this is the thesis, technology versus nature, I think this one's pretty surface level. This is a very easy read to make on the movie because of the language that's used and the things that the characters are talking about. That lunch scene is pretty explicitly about the tension between nature and technology, whereas I think the children and parents theme it's almost more of a character-based theme, right? It may be a bit of a stretch to call John Hammond the father of the dinosaurs, right? But at the same time, I think that theory holds some water as a reading of the movie. It's certainly an important aspect of Alan Grant's character arc, but I don't know that it necessarily could expand to encompass the whole entirety of the film. There is this very interesting little conversation that Grant and Malcolm have in the car as they're waiting for the power to come back on, and Grant asks him, "Do you have any kids?" And Malcolm says that he has a lot of kids, right? He has multiple. He's always looking out for the next ex Mrs. Malcolm. God, Jeff Goldblum has so many good lines in this movie. That is almost used as a foil to Alan Grant's character arc. It doesn't really serve Malcolm's character so much as it offers him, and like Alan, an interesting bit of insight into the complexities of fatherhood, or what parenthood really could mean. So yeah, I don't know that we could necessarily say that the movie at large is about that. Then we've got extinction and perseverance. To a larger degree, I think you could say that much of the film is about the tension between those two concepts and the interaction between those two concepts. The film certainly ends on a note that connects to that theme directly with the image of the birds. And then profit versus entertainment. I think this, again, is like a meta theme. This is like the theme that exists almost outside of the text of the story. It's like you wake up in a cold sweat thinking, oh my God, this is what Jurassic Park is really about. If I was going to make this the most clickbaity version of this show, that is what I would be going with. But again, I do think that's almost sort of a read on Spielberg's filmography, than more so than it is what he's trying to say with the film. I think that the best contender for what Jurassic Park is really about, the relationship between extinction and perseverance. It's a theme that is larger than man, larger than dinosaurs. It connects both the dinosaur characters, could you call them characters, and the human characters as well. And so that, I think, is what I'm going to hang my hat on. Did I already say hang my hat on earlier? I think I might have. That's an odd turn of phrase. Do people say that a lot? If you were to ask me, gun to my head, what is Jurassic Park about? I would say extinction and perseverance. Thank you so much for listening. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to subscribe and like. But if you're an audio listener, I love you more. Thank you for being here. You can follow me on Substack. Just look up Under the Paperweight and you'll find me. There will be links to all my social media on my blog there. Of course, if you want to follow me on Letterboxd, that's probably where I'm the most active. And I will be dropping my definitive ranking of all of the Jurassic World movies as soon as this episode comes out. Thank you very much for listening. I'll see you next time.